Hi everyone, I'm Caitlin Halliwell and welcome to the Study Space free online lecture series. This lecture is entitled Did You Even Read the Text? And is the first in a series of 3 lectures that we're presenting over the next 3 weeks on all 3 areas of study in VCE English. Just to let you know how this works, you can actually ask your questions whilst I'm speaking through our Q&A app on the right hand side. So if you pop your questions in there, I will endeavour to answer them at the end of the lecture. Okay, now I'm actually going to share a presentation with you. Okay, so I've called this lecture Did You Even Read the Text? Because I think that often students think that maybe they can get away with not reading the text in this area of study, and I'm here to tell you that that is not a wise idea, which is pretty much what any English teacher would tell you. You really need to know your text as well as possible for this area of study. So let's start by thinking about exactly what this area of study is all about. So if you think about reading and responding, its main focus is on text, and it is on analysis of the text, quite clear focus on analysing in as much depth and detail as you can a text that you're studying, and you're also assessed as you are in any text or in any assessment in English, you're assessed on your ability to write an essay as well. Okay, so you're writing the content you include and how you express yourself. So there's sort of always those 2 parts to an English assessment. You're not just assessed on the content, but you're assessed on how you express that content. So if you have a look at this word diagram, which is actually taken from the VCAA study design, you can see, the words that are more bold, things like construct and language and meta-language, conventions, analysis. They're the words that appear quite often in the VCAA study design when they're explaining what reading and responding is about. You need to think about a whole range of decisions that an author makes when they're writing a text. So you need to think about the language choices they've made. The meta-language comes in because you need to know the language of talking about language, which is what meta-language is. So you need to have the words and the language to talk about how somebody else has used language. Things like interpretations and features, we're thinking about how an author constructs a text, some of the features, how they create meaning in a text, and also looking at the textual features or the way that they can be interpreted, so how different readers might interpret things differently. If we think about what a text is made up of, we need to think about characters, themes, issues, big ideas, context and setting, and construction and language. So obviously in a text response, you need to think about, or in your reading of a text, you need to think about the fact that no author writes a novel or any sort of piece of literature by accident. So they set out to write about a certain theme or issue or idea, or several, and in doing so they will create characters that will help them explore the themes, issues and ideas, and each novel or piece of writing will have a context and a setting. So, you know, where is it set, and will be constructed in a particular way. Authors make very specific decisions about all of these things when they're planning a text and when they're writing a text. So, you know, that's why there are so many layers of meaning in a text, because an author will actually plan out what they want to address and how they're going to go about it. So if we look in a bit more depth about characters, as I was saying, you know, no character makes their way into a text accidentally, and the author makes some really specific decisions about the characters that they put in the text, and every single character will serve some purpose in the text. So they'll either help to advance the plot, or they'll enable the author to explore one of their key themes or ideas. So it's important to think about each character in your text when you're making your notes on the text, because you may actually get a character's essay topic, and think about, or ask yourself some questions about your character. So I've got some of these questions here that I would recommend that you ask yourself, and this will help guide your notes when you're writing notes on a text. So firstly, what are your character's main actions in the plot? So what actually are they doing in the plot? In which way are they acting? How are they contributing to the plot? And are they actually helping the author examine certain big ideas or issues of the text? So try and make that link there. What are the characters' relationships like in the text? So for each particular character, think about their relationships. Who are they friends with? Who are they partners with? What point do you think the author is making by including these particular relationships in the text? You know, sometimes one of the whole points of a novel is to explore a particular type of relationship, and so obviously then characters become even more significant in this, especially, you know, with themes like betrayal, and, you know, they're very human themes, so they'll always be enacted through the characters. Think about what the character says throughout the text and why this might be significant. One of the things I do when I'm studying a text is I actually start noting down the significant things that each character says. So, you know, I have a page or a couple of pages in my notes for each of the characters, and I write down significant quotes, and I also make a bit of a note about what that particular quote says about that character. You know, why is this significant? Another thing that is really great, and this is a way that you're actually starting to develop a whole lot of your own quotes that you can use in your text response essays too, is to note down what other characters say about the character that you're focusing in on and why that's significant. So, you know, you won't just find that your character will say things that you think are significant, but other characters in the text will say things about your character or to your character that are also significant and that might give you insight into their character. So, you know, you should always have up your sleeve some quotes about your character, and you try and look for quotes to remember that link to characters and themes, so that you've got the double whammy. You know, you could use them for a theme essay or you could use them for a character-based essay. The last thing you should think about is, what do you think is the overall reason for this character being included in the text? So, if you had to sum up why you think this character is even in the text, what exactly would you say about that particular character? Because this really is what you're being asked to do if you are writing a character-based essay in the exam or in one of your assessment tasks. You're being asked to think about why this character is significant and what they mean for the text. So it's really important. In terms of themes and issues and big ideas, again, an author makes some really conscious decisions about what they wish to explore. They may have been inspired by something, and they may be trying to do a myriad of different things in their text. So, we could think about they might be trying to explore a certain idea or discuss something or evaluate or present or comment. And there are a whole lot of different themes or issues or big ideas that you can get in texts. So if we think about what you might be facing, you might actually find that an author presents an idea or an issue. So things like coming of age, prejudice, or youth culture, what are they really trying to explore? They may be focusing in on an ideology and the potential ramifications. So, often we find books, particularly novels set in historical times, might be trying to warn us of the dangers of a particular way of thinking or a certain political viewpoint. These are all really significant ideas, and they're quite common in literature as well. You might find that the attitudes of a particular time in history or of a particular place are something that the author is exploring. So, if your novel is set in a certain time of history or a certain country or during a certain event, either real life or fictional, why has the author chosen that time or place or event, and why is that significant? So if they're exploring something like an event or a time or a place, often really the crux of what is being explored is how people respond or react to situations. So, you're actually looking at human nature, and that's one of the most common things you'll find in text response or in text in general, in literature in general, is that focus on humanity and human nature, because that's what joins us all together, gives us a commonality. Some of the common themes you'll find in literature are things like relationships, politics or ideologies, the nature of power. You might find that a lot of the texts you read are coming of age texts, which is also known by the German term Bildungsroman. So it's actually looking at growing up, and the challenges of growing up and making the transition between childhood and adulthood, and that is often a really common theme in a lot of texts. And texts obviously will be looking at more than one big idea, but often, in the exploration of a whole lot of different themes and ideas, that coming of age one is in there as well. Things like corruption and change versus tradition, or knowledge versus ignorance, they're common themes in texts, and there's a massive list of them which we can't really go into today, except to say, have a think about it, do some reading about themes in literature, and try and identify the themes in your text, and make extensive notes on how those themes or ideas or issues are examined in your text and the message the author's trying to get through to you, because the author won't just be presenting these themes and saying, hey, have a look at this. They'll actually be presenting their own opinion or ideas, or trying to influence you in some way or make you feel a certain way, just like any text that you'll read. Think about what the author's ultimate purpose is in discussing this theme. What do they want you to take out of it? Things like context and setting, just like we've said that no author is actually accidentally writing a text, they're making some decisions about what they're going to write about and how. You also should think about the context and setting, because no piece of writing is created in a vacuum, and so the author themselves may have had particular experiences or read certain things that have inspired or motivated them to write the text. And it's really great for you to fully understand the text and what the author's intentions were in writing it, to know a bit more about the author themselves, where they grew up and what kind of childhood they had, and the sort of things that they experienced that might be significant. And you may actually be able to find some interviews or some writing where the author's actually talking about what inspired or motivated them to write the text. And this stuff is really great to give you context when you're writing about a text, so that you can actually include some of that knowledge in your essay. Obviously you wouldn't focus on it, but it helps to show the assessor that you have a broader knowledge of the text. You might also want to think about the time and the place that the novel's set in. So, if it was set in a past time, what was society like then? Do the characters reflect this society, or are they progressive for their time? Are they challenging the norms of that time? Because that will tell you a lot about what the author's saying. If it's a different place, or some sort of different places, often texts will have periods set in different places or in different times. These will be significant too. So why is it the author chosen these particular places or these particular times, and what is the significance of each of them? Are they symbolic or representative of something bigger that's going on in the text? So we're always looking at these things in terms of context and setting, and thinking about how they contribute to the author making meaning in the text. Again, all of these things are significant. So think about how it might be symbolic or representative of something. In terms of construction and language, just like the author makes decisions about what will be included in the text on a large scale, they also make some really big decisions about how the text will be constructed. So, will there be episodes or chapters, and how will these be sequenced? Will there be flash forwards or flashbacks, or will it be set over a period of 30 years or a period of a week? All of these things are quite significant and help the author make meaning. So think about the sequencing and think about how the text is put together, and look for features that are a little bit different, because they'll be quite intentional, and they'll have a certain effect on how you interpret the text and how you experience it. So think about that sort of construction. Also think about language choices. So just like you, when you're writing a persuasive piece or some sort of creative piece, you think about your language dependent on what you're trying to get across, and your word choice or imagery and motifs dependent on how you're trying to influence the reader. So look for anything that's repeated, repeated imagery or scenery or repeated symbols, because obviously they're also in there for a reason, and you need to determine what that reason is. So if we think about text study on a broad scale, there are some things that are really important in terms of how to approach this area of study, and particularly moving into your exam revision phase. You need to think about what it is that you're going to do to really know your text. So what I would suggest is that to really know your text, and as tedious as it might be, you should read it more than once. And I think you can probably get away with reading it twice if you read it the first time for meaning and for understanding, without any preconceived ideas about what the text is. And then the second time you go back, you're reading it knowing what is going to happen, so you're more able to identify significant quotes and significant events, turning points for characters. So you need to go back through the second time, and I would write notes actually in my text. If you're happy to do that, do that. Otherwise, have a notebook, and organise your notes. You can colour code them in the text if you're going to write all over your book, but organise them into characters and themes, and really take note of, or as many notes as you can. What I would suggest to do then as well is, if you've got your notes in your book or if you've got them in a notebook, start organising them. So for me, being a really visual person, if I write things and I tend to remember what that writing looked like. I can picture it on the page once I've written it. So I would always organise my notes and go through and go through the text again and start writing some of my notes out under subheadings, and categorising them. And then I would actually reorganise them. So I went through and then I highlighted the important quotes that I wanted to remember, and they were the ones that I tried to memorise, because they were the ones that gave me the biggest impact. They focused on a theme and a character, so that I could use them in a few different situations in a text response. They're the kinds of things that you want to be doing when you're revising or even initially studying a text, because you're going to have all that information at your fingertips for your text response essays and ultimately for the exam. So you also need to think about what other people say about the text. So it's a really good idea to read other people's opinions about the text. You might find that they say things that you hadn't really thought of, that they interpret things a little bit differently to you, and that's a really great thing, because you might say, oh, I hadn't thought about that way, but yeah, that makes sense. Or you might think, no, I don't really think that that's accurate. I think it's more like this. And so it helps you to start forming opinions, because you're going to have some pretty solid opinions when it comes time to writing an assessment piece. You have to know what you think about the text and what you think the author's doing in the text. So if you haven't already decided before you go into the exam what you think the text is all about, then you're going to make it much more difficult for yourself. That sort of brings me to my next point, which might sound like it's a bit of a silly thing to say, but you actually kind of have to write when you're doing a text study. And by that, I'm not trying to be sarcastic or flippant, but you need to be able to summarize what you know about the text and how you know it. So you need to ask yourself questions about the characters and themes and challenge yourself to answer them. Because too often students, I find, don't actually think about how they would describe or explain or argue what they're thinking about a text until they actually have to sit down and write a text response essay. And then it's too late because you're paralyzed by not knowing what you're hoping to cover. So what you actually find is that students will get writer's block because they'll sit there and they'll think, oh well, I'm not sure and I don't have evidence. And so the more you're writing in the planning and studying phase, the better off you'll be. The more essays you can write, the more plans you can write, the more essay topics you can look at and think about and brainstorm, the better. If you can keep churning out essays and giving them to your teachers, even, setting aside just 1 hour a week for English on the weekends or on one weeknight, sit there in that 1 hour, time yourself and try and write an essay, because you might find that helps you realize the things you don't know. Because when you're sitting there and you're under pressure and you have to write something, you might suddenly realize that you're not entirely sure what to write. And it's better to realize that earlier on in the year and have time to rectify that than to realize it in the exam or in your assessment tasks throughout the year. So really challenge yourself, and you need to start writing. Just thinking about it isn't enough. Express yourself in writing, and think about how you would summarize the author's main ideas, themes, messages in your own words. And even if you just started by writing a paragraph that summarizes each particular excuse me, that summarizes each particular idea or theme or character, you can build up from there then. What I would also suggest is have your notes sitting beside you when you're writing your practice essays, because then you can look at the notes, you can include quotes from your notes in the essay, and the more you do this, the easier it will be for you to remember them when you're under pressure, because you're getting used to writing out particular quotes. It'll help you see which ones you'll be able to use more in the exam as well, because if you find that there are certain quotes that you're using time and time again in your practice essays, well, they're the quotes you need to remember for the actual exam. So think about that as well. The next thing I'd like to touch on a little bit is that you need to understand the essay topic before you start writing, because an essay topic is not just an essay topic. You don't attack each essay topic in the same way. There are different types of topic, and the way you need to address them is slightly different. So, think about questions that ask you to discuss. And when a topic ends with the words discuss, it's sort of more of a statement than a question. So you're being presented with a statement about the text and you're being asked to discuss the implications of this statement. So, you're not obliged to agree with the topic. In that way, it's similar to the do you agree. What is being asked of you is that you are addressing the elements, all of the elements of the topic, and that you're discussing the statement that's being made. So in that way, you may actually form more of a discussion than an argumentative sort of text response. When you get something that's like in what ways, it's asking you to determine, so in what ways does X author examine the theme of Y. So, it's actually asking you to focus in on the evidence or the different ways that the author presents that particular information or presents that idea. So that kind of a topic will really focus you in on a particular element. If you get questions that include a quote in the question, well, then you need to tackle that quote. You need to think about what the quote is saying about the text, you need to acknowledge that quote in your essay, and you need to acknowledge the elements of the text that that quote discusses. So, you know, if that quote is a particular character discussing something that links to a particular theme, well, then you'd have to talk about that character and you'd have to talk about that theme in your discussion. When something is asking you to what extent does X author examine blah blah blah, you might say that element, so, you know, to what extent does a particular author examine the idea of coming of age. And you might say, whilst the idea of coming of age is explored in this text, it is actually the theme of whatever that is more significant or more important. So, you know, you can say, well, yes, definitely to a certain extent the text is about this, but it's more about this, you know. So you can shift the focus of the response more towards the element of the text that you think is more important or the most important, but you still have to discuss that particular element that the question focuses in on. Okay, so don't think that you can take the essay topic and make it your own. You know, if it's saying something that you don't quite agree with, or if it's focusing you in on something and you'd rather focus on something else, you still actually have to talk about what is in the topic, but you can add to what you would like to discuss. You know, you can complicate the question a little bit by saying, well, yes, you know, whilst it is true that this is examined in the text, it is such and such which is more significant. So think about essay topics and how you might address different types of topic. And the best way to do this really is to look at, you can find lists of essay topics. Lots of websites have a whole lot of essay topics listed on each text. Go through, think about how you would address each particular topic. Do a bit of a plan. Firstly, brainstorm, then do a plan. Write your contention or your introduction. Doing that is a really good way to challenge yourself, you know, and you'll work out which points are your weakest or the things that you're not sure of by doing this, because you might get a topic and you think, wow, if I got that topic in the exam, I would have no idea how to even respond to it. And that's a great thing to discover when you're studying. It's really not something that you want to discover down the track when you're trying to write an assessment task or an exam. The other thing I wanted to mention in this lecture is about proper planning. So it's actually really important to plan out every essay that you'll write. Even in the exam, you get 1 hour to write your reading and responding essay. You can spend 10 to 15 minutes of that time planning out your essay, because you may not think it, but actually the essay plan will help you write the body of the essay quicker. So the better your plan is, the more easily you'll get through the whole essay as you're writing, because you're not stopping every 2 minutes in the exam thinking, oh, what am I going to write next? What will my next paragraph be? You know, you really have to have an idea of what you want to say in each paragraph, so you know where you're starting and you know where you're moving to and you know where you're going to end. And that's the only way you'll get a nice flow from start to finish, because if you're writing paragraph 1 and you know what paragraph 2 is, Well, by the end of paragraph 1, you'll be linking to paragraph 2 because you're knowing what's coming and you know how they interlink. If you were just to write, or to just start writing without a plan, you'd actually find that your essay starts becoming a series of dot points almost. So, you do need to really focus in on planning out your essay. It's important to have a clear contention and 3 supporting ideas. You may have 2 main ideas, you might have 4. People say 3 because it's a nice sort of structure to an essay, but there's no rule that says it has to be 3. It could be 2. Obviously, if you have 2 paragraphs, there'll be longer paragraphs than if you had 4. But there should be clear ideas for each paragraph and a clear topic sentence in each paragraph that makes it quite obvious what you're going to discuss. So, an assessor should never be guessing what you're actually writing about, and that's really important. In terms of evidence, you need to think about in the body paragraphs of your essays, including as much evidence as you can to support what you're talking about. So obviously you're going to need to have some quotes, and as I was saying before, try and make sure that the quotes you choose to memorize are quotes that work for a myriad of circumstances. So, you wouldn't memorize something that's really specific to just one theme or idea. You try to find quotes that can be used for quite a few, and a quote doesn't have to be 5 sentences. A quote could be 3 or 4 words actually that you can pop into a sentence that adds depth and shows that you know the text, and that it shows some insight to a character or theme. So don't think you have to remember big slabs of text, because that actually doesn't work when you're trying to work those in anyway. Things like paraphrasing and summary, you wouldn't rely solely on paraphrasing and summary, but you might say something like, when X and Y character are on the beach and this happens, it is significant because blah, blah, blah. So you're actually referring to a section of the text or an event or an idea, and you might not have a specific quote, but you're referring to detail from the text. So it's quite okay to be doing that as well, and you will need to do that. So as specific as you can be is the best option. Okay, that ends the presentation part of that lecture tonight. I'd like to thank you all for viewing, and my screen share so you can see me again. So thank you for viewing. This lecture will be available for you to view again online in your own time, so feel free to do that. I'll be sending out the link to everybody. I don't have any questions as yet, so I have left some time for answering questions, but there are none, so that's great. This is one of a series of our free lectures. We also do some quite detailed revision lectures on each area of study, and also some general study skills lectures that you might like to sign up for. So you can find out more about what we do by visiting www.thestudyspace.com.au, and you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter or Google Plus for daily tips and hints. And we also do things like essay feedback and one-to-one tutoring. So if you would like to do more practice essays and get feedback on those, or if you would like to have a couple of tutoring sessions because you want to focus in on a particular topic or there's something you're unsure of, then you can visit our website and check out those other services as well. So thanks for joining us tonight, and good luck with the rest of your year in English.